Hi, everybody. We are calling you from outer space today. This is Biz. I'm in EPIP headquarters with Tamir and Emily. Sorry for the technical difficulty. We're really excited for this final webinar of 2015 and chance to hear from Tamir Novotny, our new executive director. So thanks everyone for logging on. I'm just going to walk through a little bit for anyone who might be new to EPIP to give you a little sense of who we are and also set some housekeeping ground rules for the webinar and get on to the real main event here. So for anyone who's new, welcome. Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy, EPIP, is a national network of foundation professionals, social entrepreneurs, and other change makers who strive for excellence in the practice of philanthropy. And we do that through three different focuses. We help you connect with others. We help you learn and practice leadership skills. And we aim to help you feel inspired by the emerging ideas in the social sector. If you're not a member yet or you have any questions as a new member or an old member, I would love to help answer those questions. So please feel free to reach out to me via email, biz@epip.org. And I look forward to hearing from you. We are really excited about the 2016 webinars that have been scheduled. The events will be listed on our website at epip.org/events. The first one of the year is on January 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be with Monisha Kapila from ProInspire talking about managing up. She's been a speaker at some of our webinars in the past. She's phenomenal, and we're really excited to have her back. So please take a minute to register and keep your eyes peeled for more event postings in the coming weeks. For today's webinar, we are going to use interactivity through your chat, through your dashboard box. You're going to be able to post questions by typing them in where it says questions. If you have any technical challenges, if you can't hear, or if we're echoing, if we sound like we're on a spaceship again, you can go ahead and type it in there, and I'll try to help you address the issues. We also are really eager to hear your questions throughout, so please definitely put those questions in the question box or use Twitter, the hashtag AskTamir and the hashtags EPIPWebinar to follow the conversation and to share your thoughts there. We will be recording the webinar, so please know that your questions will be recorded. And at the end, the post-webinar survey will come to you pretty quickly after the call ends, and we'd love to hear your thoughts to the short survey then. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our speakers, Tamir Novotny, our Executive Director, and Emily Kessler, who is now our Senior Advisor here at EPIP.
Thanks, Viz. Can everybody hear me? I hope so. For some reason, we have a very strange echo going on today. So thanks for joining us today. So we have a really fun program for you. I am going to interview Tamir about his path leading up to being our executive director and some of his thoughts for the future. So thank you, Tamir, for being available to our members and our allies and our partners today for this town hall. So let's jump in, and I know we're all curious to hear from Tamir. Tell us about yourself and your path that has led you to EPIP.
Sure. So first of all, I just want to thank you all for being here and taking the time to interact with me. I especially want to thank Emily and Biz, and some of you have heard me say this already. As an incoming ED, I could not ask for a better situation to walk into. Emily and more recently, Biz have really led us through a transition period that lasted almost a year And the organization's in great shape thanks to their hard work and leadership. So I just want to thank them before I say anything about myself. Now, about me, one, I'm not only the president, I'm also a client. I don't know if any of you remember those old commercials, maybe before some of your time, but I've been in philanthropy almost 10 years, and I've been involved with EPIP for 3 of those years. I started as a chapter leader in New York, got involved with the national team as a regional coordinator for the Northeast, working with New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and DC. So for any of you who are chapter leaders on the call, thank you for everything that you do for your community. And I know how important the membership is to making EPIP work. More than anything else, we're a community of change makers, and that is driven by all of you on the phone and the many others who aren't able to join us right now. As far as what got me into this work, I'm the kid of a refugee. My father's brother was born in a refugee camp in Austria. His parents were like one of 2 kids from families of 7 on both sides who escaped the Nazis. My father was born, his father lived in the same really kind of like not very nice apartment until he reached 100 and died 2 weeks later. My mom's family fled pogroms in the late 19th, early 20th century. And my parents, they got together, and for a little bit, they achieved the American dream. We had a little house in the suburbs, and then it kind of got complicated. There were some pretty serious health issues, and, we were really a poor family that lived a middle-class lifestyle thanks to both the sacrifices that my grandparents made to keep us okay, and frankly, the social safety net. And there were a lot of people along the way who bent rules and went out of their way so that I could see a future that was brighter than my present. And so one is I'm grateful for that. I think everybody should have that opportunity. And I know full well, as we all do, that if the color of my skin had been different, if I had identified differently in terms of sexual orientation or any number of other considerations, I might not be here right now at all or as a part of EPIP. And that's why I do this work. And I spent about 10 years at a place called Living Cities, which is a philanthropic collaborative focused on really moving the needle on urban poverty, doing different things, work related to the fallout of foreclosures in communities of color, working with local governments to adopt innovations that improve the lives of low-income people. And that is the sort of perch that led me to EPIP. And EPIP really created space for me to find my path as a leader in this field. And being in this role allows me, one, just to be of service to the community, which I'm very excited about, but also allows me to spend more time focusing on a set of issues and frankly frustrations that I have had with this field for a while about how we work, who we serve, who we're accountable to, and how do we just bring the way that this incredibly privileged field works into deep alignment with our values as a rising generation of leaders, as the most diverse generation in American history, and as folks who just believe in democracy and sharing of power.
Thanks, Tamir. You really show a great passion for this work. We've known each other for quite some time, having served on the EPIP New York chapter together, and it's really wonderful to see you in this role. So, can you tell us a little bit about where you see EPIP going in the next several years?
Sure. So folks may not know, we're actually coming into EPIP's 15th year. And I think it's important to acknowledge just how much EPIP has accomplished in its first 15. A lot of people, I've been talking to folks who have been removed from EPIP for years, and so many people, current and past, have told me what EPIP has done for them personally, how it helped them find their way. I look at the EPIP alumni who've moved into positions of power and influence in philanthropy and beyond. And that is and has always been and will be a core part of our DNA. I believe in the power of this community as a safe space and a platform for people to figure out how they want to move through this sometimes really crazy world we all work in. EPIP remains committed, and I am personally committed to preserving and building on that legacy. And at the same time, many of our members are hungry to go even further. If you all have looked at the blogs that came out of this year's People of Color Network convening, if you haven't, I strongly encourage it, epip.org/blog.
Yep.
they're really incredible. Folks are thinking really hard about how they make philanthropy more inclusive, more diverse, more equitable. And for us as an organization and a community to find more ways to support our members in exercising that leadership, informing deeply considered and well-informed points of view, and connecting them to people who can help them sort of figure out what that looks like. That is something that I see us exploring and learning how to do better together in the coming years.
That's great. And so you mentioned that you had been chapter leader for a while and regional coordinator. So clearly you have some institutional knowledge, right? But was there something that might have surprised you about EPIP that you didn't know about beforehand when stepping into this role?
Yeah, you've heard me use the word community a few times. I will say when I was interviewing, when I started, I really thought of EPIP more as a network, and that's how many of our members describe us. But as I encountered just the incredible goodwill that people have, even when their day-to-day doesn't involve EPIP as much as it used to, and I've seen, both in my time leading up to this, but especially since I've started, how much of themselves our chapter leaders put into this work, how much energy our board invests in stewarding our community. To call it a network almost shortchanges just how collectively invested people are, not just for their own development, but for their peers, and for the country, really, and our future together. So that has really struck me, and in ways that I'm still, frankly, teasing out, it's affecting how I think about how we move forward, how we build a future that we all collectively own, and things like that.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that on that part. It's the people talk about the culture of EPIP, and you really feel it and see it at the national conference. But it really is very strong, and it's something that Rusty infused here at EPIP, that Rasan carried on with, and that I was able to see, and I think it's a huge asset to what EPIP brings to the community. So I'm going to get a little pushy here.
All right, let's do it.
And I want to know, Tamir, what's a white dude doing, leading an organization working to advance diversity in the sector?
That's a great question, and frankly, that's a question I asked the board when I was interviewing for this role. And I will say, I am being the best ally I can be. I am fully committed, as I said before, to our goal of diversifying leadership in philanthropy and making philanthropy in general a place that is as effective as possible in working with people from historically marginalized communities to address the legacy of inequity that we inherit and continue to battle today, and create a world where everyone can thrive regardless of how they identify. But it's also not just about me. As I've said, to me, EPIP is a community, one in which a huge number of our members and stakeholders play really important roles. I look at our board, I look at our chapter leadership, our fellows, and everybody has a role to play. When I look across that broader community, it's strikingly diverse. And so I think the most important thing for me, I've had sort of my own experiences, but they're not the experiences of others. And so I think it's especially important to always be cognizant of what privilege I have had and make sure that I never step beyond the extent to which I actually speak for our community, and to always be mindful of what I'm hearing and really sort of listening before I act.
Great. Thank you for that. And can you talk a little bit more about some of your plans for 2016? What's in the mix for you, and what are you really looking forward to doing in this role?
So the thing I'm most looking forward to is just getting to know all of you. So I'm planning to come out to each of the areas in which we have chapters, and many where we maybe don't have as much of an active footprint. I want to get to know the people who are really working for our community. Many of you I already know, and I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you. I want to better understand the local context in which people are doing their work. And I want to meet people who could be a part of our community but aren't. And so some of you may hear from me as I'm planning that, and I hope I get to meet all of you when I come through your neck of the woods. Beyond that, Conference 2016 is going to be awesome. We'll have more to announce about that pretty soon, but look for conference to be in the early fall, and in a place that I think people will be excited about. It's also, as I said earlier, our 15th anniversary, so we'll be celebrating that, but we'll also be using that time to reflect on where we've come and using that as a sort of reference point as we think about what our future looks like.
Great, thank you. So here's a question that we sometimes ask on the Emerging Leader Salon panel when we've done this at the conferences. And it always yields some really interesting results. So I'm going to pose this to you, Tamir. What was a mistake you've made in the past that you've learned from?
Man, I have to pick only one. All right, so there's
lots of time we can go over.
So one thing that I've corrected, but it took me a while to realize I was doing, is when I was younger, I was a little bit too cavalier about some pretty major life decisions. I went to grad school kind of on a whim. Like, my advisor called me into our office and said, like, you finished your major, you still have to be here for a year, you have all these credits to do. You want to get a master's? And I was like, okay, sure. And it ended up being great, and it opened a lot of doors that have led me where I am. But in retrospect, I wish that I had really been more intentional about where I want to be. I had some preconceived notions about my future. I was going to be a youth worker, by the way. That was sort of my first love, and I still love it and miss it every day. Though I'm really glad to be working at sort of a systems level now. And I wrote a lot of things off that I wish I had given more of a chance before making those decisions. And so the path that led me to EPIP was one that involved a few years of trying different things, really having a plan, doing a lot of writing, and being much more disciplined about making sure that the things that I was doing were all pointing in a direction that I cared about, thinking about legacy, and holding myself accountable for answering the questions that I was asking. And so, it took a while to get there, but I think that's especially important because it's so easy. We all know people who really get lost in our field. Because it's no organization's like formal responsibility to make sure we achieve our life's purpose, and it's just so easy to get lost and end up adrift and like dissatisfied but not sure what to do about it. So I'm glad that I sort of figured a lot of that out relatively early in my career.
Yeah, it's I'm thinking of the word intentional as you're telling the story, and I sort of had a similar strange path myself. And I'm wondering, and this is not for us to answer right now, but questions come up for me all the time about the balance between, having a plan, but also kind of taking opportunities as they come up. Like, I never would have known, I could never have foreseen a couple of years ago that I would have been EPIP's interim ED for almost a year. And so, you might have a nicely planned path for yourself, but when these amazing and sometimes scary opportunities come up, like, when do you divert from that plan?
Yeah, and I thought that I was going to be a peace activist in my next sort of phase of my career, and then a year ago, Rasan sat me down and he said, I'm going to be, Rasan, for those of you who don't know, Rasan Harris is our former executive director. He sat me down and he said, look, I'm going to be leaving EPIP. Have you thought about being the next ED? I was so caught off guard, I laughed. Yeah. And it took, the search process lasted almost a year, and it really took that much time to think through, like, what the best thing, both for myself and for, again, the community would be as far as, like, the role that I wanted to play. It was conference this year that put me over the top. If any of you were at the conference in New Orleans, it was really incredible, and we had wonderful conversations with people who are doing work in New Orleans, trying to promote like a just and equitable rebuilding of the area. And it was personally transformative. And I thought, if this is the kind of thing I would get to do, man, would it not be a privilege?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun putting that together. It was exhausting, but it was a lot of fun. You mentioned Rasan, and I know that Ileana, our social media fellow, for those of you out there, has written a really beautiful interview, her essay from her interview with you, which we have yet to post. That's coming soon, folks. But she asked you about what you've learned from Rasan's leadership, and I'm wondering if maybe you can share a little bit right now, or should folks wait for the interview?
No, we can spoil it now. I think one of the things two things that Rasan taught me that I take with me now. One is the solution doesn't always have to be structural. And sometimes when we're not sure about how something is supposed to work, our first instinct is to like write a one pager or like have a long meeting about process. And sometimes the problem is really simple. And it's like, well, actually, like we're all just kind of feeling anxious about making a decision because it's high stakes and we need to get right with that or whatever the case may be. The other relatedly is, you got to know when it's time to collaborate and when it's time to lead, right? And, in any, obviously EPIP is an organization that values consensus, that values collective ownership of decisions, of policies. But at the same time, at some point, you got to look forward and say, hey, this is what's in front of us. Maybe we're kind of stalling here, like in this role, it's my job to do X. And so here's what I would propose. And Rasan was never afraid to do that. He was never afraid to try and be willing to fail for the right reasons. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. The concept of leadership is such an interesting one when, especially for those folks who are kind of maybe not in a leadership position at work, right? So, and so what in your opinion, Tamir, what does leadership look like for folks in the EPIP network?
Mm-hmm.
How would you say someone could maybe express their leadership if they're an EPIP member?
Yeah. So one thing, and you guys have probably all heard this before, and frankly, often when you're in more of a junior position, it's used as a way to stifle leadership rather than encourage it. But like, leadership can happen from anywhere. I genuinely believe that. I was a senior associate at my last job. I started in that organization as an intern, and as an intern, helped develop a $5 million portfolio that I then came to manage as an associate. It's the only story my old CEO ever tells about me, actually. I give him a lot of crap for that. But, it's different in every institution. The rules are different. It can be hard. You don't always get credit for the leadership you do. But leadership to me is really about mobilizing action for a clear purpose. Mm-hmm. And again, the rewards and the costs of that are not always the same. And everybody, has their own calculus to do about what's worth doing. But I think the worst thing, and I've seen people do it, you guys have seen people do it too, is like, they just say, well, it's not worth it, so I'm just going to kind of muddle through. I think that's actually highly corrosive to people and to their institutions. So not to make this too much of like an advice session, because who am I? But, I really do believe leadership can happen anywhere. And the most important thing is, what do you believe? What are the values that you want to make manifest in your institution and in the broader world? And then sort of doing what you have to do to bring people along.
Right.
But sorry, I want to add one more thing. In my role in particular, but I think especially for folks who are in sort of positions of stewardship, leadership, if you read like Harvard Business Review, so much of it is about like the leader overcoming resistance and pushing through their vision. That's kind of nonsense, right? Like people ask me a lot, like, what's your vision for EPIP? And the truth of the matter is a lot of it comes from what people have told me. And so being able to listen enough to be changed by what you hear, as Amy Lazarus of Inclusion Ventures often says, is just as important as putting forward a vision and bringing people along.
Yeah, I'm hearing you say it's a collective. That's collective vision.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I'm stealing another question from the Emerging Leader Salon. And this is really more playful. What's your theme song? What song would be playing when you walk into a room?
Funny you should ask. So the other week I was working on a budget for the board for 2016, and the song that we're about to play popped into my head. We'll see if we can get it to work here.
I ever did before. Going for the dream that I have this in my mind. But I know that I'm making it. I gotta get mine and nobody's taking it away. No, cause Hammer don't play that. Just trying to get my too legit, that's way. Too legit.
All right, I get the idea. Sorry, we started from the middle because we were playing and grooving around to it before we got on the line.
Is there a background story to this, or you just?
Well, the background story is I was writing this budget And you know, I don't know if any of you have had this experience where you get into a job and it has more responsibility than you had before, and like you feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, you know, and like you find yourself be like, yeah, I can do this part. I can do this part. I can totally hang. And so I'm writing this budget, and like I was in week 3, I'm writing this budget, and the song pops into my head. I send it to the board, or I probably send it to the staff. I'm walking down the street on our 20-minute walk to the train from our office, singing this song on the street like a freaking idiot. So that's the backstory.
Okay. So budgeting
Yes.
was the inspiration. And my final question, before we start to take questions from the audience, Tamir, is what message do you have for the EPIP community today?
I would just say again, you know, as a community, I look forward to us building the future together, building on the legacy that I have the privilege of sort of stewarding at this time. I'm looking forward to meeting all of you, if I haven't already, reconnecting with those of you I do already know, and to moving our community forward together.
Excellent, thank you. So we'd like to open up the space now for anyone who has a question or two for Tamir. We're taking them through the chat box. We're taking them through Twitter, #AskTamir. If you know Tamir's cell phone, you can text him. But I'm not going to give that number out right now. And as we wait for the huge influx of questions that we're expecting, I'll pull one out of my back pocket. So Tamir, you are a former chapter leader. Tell me, how much do you love the EPIP chapter leaders, and what do you have in store for them this year?
My arms are not long enough to do this much that would adequately answer that question.
The big hug.
Chapter leaders are so much the heart and soul of what EPIP does. It's in many ways the primary vehicle through which our members really get to learn and grow and practice. And you know, they are really the lifeblood of EPIP, man. Like, you know, as a regional coordinator, it was really sort of an honor to be able to just be a sounding board for folks. And if you're not a chapter leader and you're interested, I would strongly encourage you to get in touch with your local chapter. If you don't have a local chapter, talk to us, and we'll help you figure out what that might look like.
Sounds good. All right, so the questions are coming in. We've got one from Hafiza, who I know is in Chicago. Hi, Hafiza. Thanks for your question. She wants to know, how do you see your role in leveraging the power of our network to push changes in philanthropy, social change sector? Great question.
That is a great question. And hi, Hafiza. So that really is, again, sort of the core of where I see us sort of evolving from where we are today. And I think it comes down to a few things. So one is, we talked about chapter leaders being the lifeblood of EPIP in so many ways. Excuse me. And so part of it is, are we making the sort of differential investment in our chapter leaders that prepares them to be agents of change to the extent that they want to? I've heard people say that when they come to be a chapter leader, they expect a level of sort of training and investment. So I want us to figure out what that looks like. And that can be leadership at the local level or at the national level. Second, you know, our blog is a great place for people to sort of speak their minds and, you know, share thoughts on how we can work together as a community. But I think we can be more purposeful in responding to issues that our members really care about, getting stuff out there on what philanthropy can do differently, and not limiting ourselves to philanthropy. So much of the time, we feel like because we work in foundations, we either don't have time to respond to other stuff, or we have to be somehow above the fray. I would really contest that. You know, I would love to see us all, and many of us are, be active citizens in the world of social change, using our privileged position in philanthropy, you know, for the greater good. And so figuring out the combination of structure and practice that enables us to do that is something that I'm very keen on.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thanks for your question, Hafiza. Hello, Kate. Kate is writing in from the West Coast. We miss you, Kate. For those of you who don't know, Kate was one of our most favorite staff members here at EPIP for quite some time. And she writes, hey guys, what do you think your biggest challenge is going to be, and how do you feel resourced to tackle it, and how can we be of support to you in that? Love, great question. Thanks, Kate.
Well, first of all, if you guys don't know Kate Seeley, get to know Kate Seeley because she is fabulous. And a big part of the reason I'm here, actually, she and I worked together on a webinar when I was still a chapter leader that sort of opened the door to joining the national team. Biggest challenge. So, like many organizations, we have a highly ambitious agenda and a relatively small team. Many of the people who do the most for EPIP are volunteers, and balancing demanding jobs, family lives, and other things. And so I think calibrating our level of ambition to what people can do, finding the right ways to support and reward the leadership different folks take, and figuring out what things really do need to be the responsibility of a staff member, and then balancing that against the resources we're able to pull together. That's all going to be really important. It's going to be a dialectic process.
Our next call is from Ben, who asks, he says, hey Tamir, how can EPIP help ensure that member foundations are more accountable and responsive to grassroots movements for structural change on the ground? Often, community leaders can't get in the door or grapple with corrosive power dynamics, even from sympathetic funders, let alone uneducated ones.
Man, that's like the $500,000 question. Well, I mean, first thing is it's important to acknowledge that we have dozens of institutions that have seen fit to dedicate resources that are earmarked for charitable purposes to the purpose of cultivating, rising generations of change makers. And that in and of itself is an investment in the kind of world we want to see. To your point, Ben, not everybody maybe sees things the same way, and especially when it comes to things like racial inequity, gender inequity, it's one of those things that it's really hard to see it, and then once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so we have to create a tent that's big enough for folks to feel comfortable walking in the door, but then find ways to sort of get the drip in the IV, and engage people in conversation, recognizing that even folks who hold different views from us are able to voice those and have those be respected, but then really push folks on what it takes. I think the specifics of that are going to vary. One of the hopes that I have is that we'll be able, for example, to better engage, corporate funders. And I'm sure there are a variety of points of view on what the potential of that is. I think that in the United States, with the rules of the game we have today, you can't move the needle on the issues we're dealing with without engaging the corporate world. And so, again, making sure we're crafting the sort of umbrella where people can come and feel safe and that they're not going to get fired for showing up. And, the other side of that is, we don't yet have sort of a deep footprint in the southeastern United States, given the history that has been shaped in part by that region. I don't think we can be the kind of community we want to be without that. And there are many folks who have a very different level of comfort and relationship with the narrative of history that many EPIP members bring. And so I think we really have to start from a place of meeting folks where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ben, for your very thoughtful question. We had this question come in through Twitter from Danny, who wants to know, how will international members be engaged in the coming year?
I love that question. So I've heard from people around the world that they are hungry for something like an EPIP in their communities. And just by our history, we remain committed to supporting the chapters that we have. There's always more that we can do to do that. And that will be a process of continuous improvement. If there are people who live outside of the United States and work outside of the United States who want to see something like EPIP in their communities, please get in touch with us. I'd love to talk to you about it.
Thanks, Tamir. That's great. Yeah, EPIP has a tendency to be very U.S. focused, but I know that there are needs for EPIP outside of our borders. So,
but
it's really important.
That may or may not mean that it is essential for EPIP to have its logo on the masthead of a chapter in South Africa or London or wherever else. Could end up being that way. But the most important thing to me is that people have the support they need to create the infrastructure especially with so much of the world now getting richer and people creating things that look a lot like American foundations, governments divesting and expecting civil society to do more. Like, we can't ignore that issue, but what exactly it looks like is going to be something we're going to have to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just gotten really quiet all of a sudden. I can't imagine everybody's questions have been answered. Wait, we've just been handed a question. This is awesome. It's like coming through the tube. What's the best way for people to reach you, Tamir?
So my email is Tamir, Tamir @epip.org. And as of now, my business number is my cell phone number. Please use it. It is 718-864-3933, Queens School of Hard Knocks, 718-864-3933. And by the way, if any of you are from Queens and know how to get a Queens School of Hard Knocks t-shirt, I will give you money because I've been looking for them and I cannot find them.
And what part of Queens do you live in?
So I grew up in Forest Hills Rego Park, and I live in Astoria now, but I promised I moved there before like everybody else I know.
My cousins grew up in Forest Hills.
Oh, yeah?
We should talk about this after.
So did the Ramones. Just FYI. And Jerry Springer.
Wait, and are you on Twitter?
Yes, @Tamir Novotny, all one word.
And who actually, we were having this conversation not too long ago about Twitter being a really effective way to network. And you've met people through Twitter. I'm terrible on Twitter. Tell me what recommendations do you have for folks who want to expand their network by using Twitter?
First of all, just get on Twitter because, like Emily said, I've met people from all over the world, some of whom now are actually good friends of mine, but also just partners and fellow travelers on the on the path to social change and personal development. It is one of the most democratic platforms in existence. I know you've probably heard about how it has supposedly a declining user base. Its user base is huge, and so many institutions are competing to see who has the most followers. It can be a little tricky to use. If you don't get your list set up right, it can be really overwhelming. It's like panning for gold. I've got a couple of lists. One of them is #EPIP leaders. Another one is Philanthropy. There's one for a group that we're a part of called the Joint Affinity Groups, which is a group of different organizations that serve people in philanthropy who identify in different ways. I'm happy to talk more about that. It's a great way to keep track of what people are up to, interact with people in real time, and get your ideas out there, and to convince people that when you have something to say, people listen.
So your secret is using lists. I think that's
that
where
makes
I
it
failed.
so much easier. And it doesn't have to be your whole life. Some people like Cory Booker used to never get off Twitter. I don't know if he does that now as a senator.
He must be pretty busy.
So he was mayor too, and they couldn't get him off during meetings. But it's like I do it. It's one of the first things I do when I get in every day, and I do it for like 20 minutes, and then sometimes I do it at night on my way home, and that's it. It doesn't have to be your whole life. Frankly, like I'm much more comfortable on Facebook, but there's stuff I post on Twitter that like I would get so many unfriends if I posted on Facebook.
Yeah. I need to start reading what you're posting on Twitter.
Yes, please.
Teresa wants to know, when will you begin visiting local chapters?
In early 2016. So I've talked to some chapter leaders already about doing that. We're getting a plan together now. And if you want to make sure you're in the loop when that happens, please drop us a line.
Excellent. So it looks like Biz has a question for you. This is interesting. Tamir, do you keep New Year's resolutions or do you make them? And what's your feeling about them?
I make a lot of resolutions. I usually don't wait till the new year. Mine for this year is really cliche. I actually have to get back to the gym.
Oh, yeah.
I used to be very good about it, and in the last year I've gotten really bad. So that may involve CrossFit. So if any of you have CrossFit pointers or warnings, that would be great. Really important, one of the things the board asked me about that I think is important for all of us is to make sure that we have a plan to care for ourselves. So like before I started this job, I made up a schematic of what my calendar was going to look like. And one of the first things people asked me was like, When are you going to do stuff that rejuvenates you? Like, when are you going to do things that have nothing to do with work? When you take your watch off, so to speak, and just clear your head. And, you know, I think it's really important that we all do that. It makes us better at our jobs, and it makes us better thinkers and leaders.
I agree. Self-care for activists, hugely important.
Huge.
My school has a whole week of self-care for activists. Generally happens right before finals. Erin wants to know if you're anticipating the addition of new chapters, and if so, do you know where?
I am. None of them are at the point right now that I could really talk about it publicly. But there are a couple of places in the Southeast that are eager to start new chapters. We have chapters that have had leadership sort of step away, and we have new people sort of coming behind them and bringing new levels of activity to those chapters. Again, if you are in a region of the U.S. where you don't have a chapter or you want to get more involved, get in touch with us. It's very important for us to make sure that folks are sort of able to engage their peers locally or regionally and build that community locally.
Yeah, and you know, EPIP's been building chapters since 2001, and we're quite good at it. So if you even have the slightest inclination that's something you might want to do, we can help guide you pretty much every step of the way, so don't hesitate.
Yeah.
And so we are coming up to the 45-minute mark, and it looks like we have exhausted the list of questions here. And so I would like to ask Tamir if you have any final thoughts as we head into this holiday season, and although it's hard to believe because it's been in the 60-degree temperatures here in New York, which is very bizarre, but we have a last-minute question before we sign off. Are there any additional plans you can talk to better engaging chapter-to-chapter collaboration?
That's a great question. And we've had some chapters that have really taken the initiative in doing that. The one that I know about best is DC and Philadelphia, who have done sort of a sister chapter thing and shared things that they're doing with one another. Our chapter leaders have a call every quarter. The next one is actually tomorrow. And if you aren't on the list but want to be a part of that, please email biz@epip.org, B-I-Z. That is one place where folks have a chance to share the work that they're doing, learn from one another. Every year we get our chapters together at a chapter leader gathering just before a conference. And that's another place for folks to share. There's more that we can do. As for the specifics of how that's going to get done, I think that's something that it's really important to have, like, the quote-unquote users of that infrastructure to be involved in. And I see chapter leaders playing a role in shaping sort of what we do from here.
Great, thank you, Sean, for that question. So, Tamir, any final thoughts as we wrap up today?
I'm just excited, and I know it sounds cliche, but like kind of humbled to have the chance to work with all of you. I mean, even from these questions, I feel how passionate people are about EPIP and how much they care about making philanthropy the kind of place that really aligns with our values as a rising generation of leaders. And, you know, this is obviously just a webinar, but I really want you to feel free and not hesitate to reach out to me if you have a question or a random idea or something I said or did made you mad and you want to call me out. Like, that's huge. I really, really value that. If there's stuff we're not doing that you think we should, you know, I want to hear it. And if you just want to connect, like, I'm around. So again, like, thank you all so much for being here, and I hope this is the beginning of a conversation.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for all your really thoughtful questions. Please continue to reach out. Use that hashtag #AskTamir in the future if things come up for you. And we're all here at EPIP National to be a resource to you in your work. So have a great holiday season, and we're going to be back here for our next webinar on January 6th. So hope you can join us, and look out for those email invitations. Will go out tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great holiday.